incident and she didn't have any physical sequela from that, I probably would counsel the parent first.
And you said again that it was a style of discipline for Nicole to have been thrown to the floor and kicked by her mother for, again, not acting appropriately. So now we have 2 incidents, correct?
That is a different incident.
Okay, but it's an incident that happened. It's a physical abuse.
That did happen.
Okay. Are you suggesting to me that there is a child that you yourself are counseling that if they had their head slammed and had their bodies kicked, that you would not think that that's abuse and should be mandatorily reported?
The first incident of 3rd grade, I probably would report that. Because the way Nicole describes it seemed pretty severe. The head slamming one, again, I told you what I would do in that situation.
So the 3 physical incidents that Nicole self-reports,
yes,
put together, although it is limited in the sense of what you and perhaps Dr. Heidi and Dr. Ewing have seen in your realm of experience, to Nicole Nachtman, those 3 physical abuse situations affected her and still do today, do they not?
She still talks about them, yes.
And you would not condone those types of activities for any of the patients that you yourself treat. Is that correct?
Certainly not. Yes, I would not condone that.
And to be fair, because we've talked a lot on direct today, that in terms of Nicole in comparison to your patients that you treat, it seemed like you're distinguishing between them. Clearly the patients that you're seeing that are adolescents has sought to intervene on their behalf, correct?
Yes.
Usually, hopefully, it's a parent, correct?
Yes.
If not a caregiver, correct?
Correct.
Some of those individuals may come to you because the school has said something's wrong, we need to do something, correct?
Yes.
Some of those come because perhaps there's been intervention in a court system, correct?
Possibility, yes.
Because not only is there a criminal justice system, but there's also a dependency system where children are taken away from parents for a lot less than these 3 incidents, right?
I don't know
about that. If you neglect them, if you don't change diapers, things like that, right?
I don't know about all these incidences. I can't comment on those.
Well, I want to get to the point where, I'm concerned with leaving this perception that, well, Miriam grew up with the guys. Her role was the mother of Nicole Nachtman to be the primary caregiver because she chose to gain full sole custody of Nicole, correct?
Yes.
So it's not like Nicole had the option of a biological father in any way whatsoever, correct?
Correct.
And as a matter of fact, just to make sure I cover the realm, although Robert Deans was married to Miriam Deans for 11 years, not one person and not one piece of document and not one thing that you've read, seen, or heard in any way indicated that Robert Deans was a significant factor in the caregiving of Nicole Nachtman.
That's not true. In her Florida Air Academy records, he has email correspondence with them. She's on his health insurance. I mean, he's speaking with them on her behalf as her father.
Any record that he ever intervened in any of the maltreatment whatsoever of Nicole Nachtman that she experienced. Let's just use, certainly not in the 3rd grade because he wasn't around, but that which happened in the 10th and 11th grade. Anyone tell you, or any records show that he ever intervened and sought assistance for Nicole when these things were happening to her?
There's not any documentation that these things ever happened to her for then there to be documentation that he didn't intervene.
He was a nice man, that's what everybody says.
Yes.
That they had met a limited number of times, a handful of times in 11 years of marriage, correct?
Correct.
So if the whole family as a whole had only met him 4 or 5 times, he is not a significant role, is not playing a significant role in this family that is caring for Nicole, correct?
I wouldn't say that. The entire family is sort of dispersed. I mean, they're not all a close family unit. They're all dispersed out. So to say that he had a limited role just because people didn't see him at family functions, I would say that that's not accurate.
Excuse me for a moment, Judge. Judge, if we could approach for a minute with Mr. Terry.
Of course.
Court exhibit. Yes. Here you go, you can pass it. Court exhibit 4, Judge, we're just gonna publish a portion.
So Doctor, what we're going to show now is a 2.22 minute clip of when Nicole Nachtman is talking to you about one of the specific acts of what we call physical abuse.
Yes.
In our questions.
Yes.
I don't know, but I know it's science. I really, and
Was this a private school? How is this private school? This third grade, where you're gonna learn about cells in third grade, and it's pretty advanced.
it was Holy Trinity, I think.
Okay, and this is in Virginia.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess I kept getting questioned wrong and wrong
It was the same one over and over again.
over and over. And really all I remember after that is that she got so mad, when she got so mad, she started kicking me and punching me and stomping on me. And I remember there's a fireplace across from the couch, and it's a brick fireplace, so it's like there's a corner of the brick fireplace, it's like it keeps, poking at your back, and
So you were on the floor, and she was sort of attacking you when you were touching the fireplace with your body. You kept on feeling that. That's the sensation you're telling me about right now.
yes,
And this was just going over because you were getting this wrong. She got frustrated, and so she was taking it out on you physically.
yes.
What were you doing, Nicole? Like, when you were laying there getting beat up, as a 8-year-old person, because you're 8 in third grade, right?
I don't know, 7 or 8.
Yeah, you're 8 years old. And you're getting beaten up because you don't know the answer to a science question. What are you thinking about just sitting there, laying there?
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
What are you saying?
I'm sorry. Just one of the times, that's all.
What do you mean, that's just one of the times, that's all? What does that mean?
Well, no, it's like one of the times one of the times I remember, because it happened multiple times, but that's one of the times I remember, especially remember.
Okay. Why do you think that one really was more than others?
It's someone. I so understand, I guess.
All right, so what we just watched, obviously, is you're asking the questions of Ms. Nachtman, as she's describing to you an area that you've obviously wanted to talk to her about, which is physical abuse.
Yes.
That was a fair and accurate representation of how she reacted, correct?
Yes.
All right, and when she's yelling, when she's saying the words, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, it's in response to you saying, what are you thinking, or what are you, she's being kicked because she didn't do the right thing. Is that not what that's depicting?
That is what she's depicting. She's saying she's sorry to her mother for making the error. Yes.
And then you ask, obviously, you know, why does this stand out as much as it does? Would you agree with me that a child at the age of 7 or 8 years old being kicked for having not known a science question certainly would be something that a child might remember?
Yes.
And I guess I also want to talk to you a little bit about, I've heard you say that Miriam was, I think what you described as growing up among boys, growing up in the military, you know, learning, I guess, or her style is to cuss a lot and things like that.
Yes.
I want to make sure I break these things up.
Sure.
So the fact that she grew up among boys, you've also been able, through your interviews and through your work that you've done with your forensic evaluation, been able to see that there were reports that were being made and observations that were being made both by Nicole and by friends and family members that Nicole maybe wasn't this girly later on in life, and that's kind of what her mother wanted, but
Correct.
so that would be an indication that her mother certainly knew how to distinguish between how, you know, girls and boys might act, or how girls and boys might be treated by their parents, correct? I mean,
I don't understand that extrapolation.
well, I guess what I'm trying to say is you kind of lumped her into that she's got kind of like one of the guys in the military, and because she grew up in this family where this was kind of acceptable, that it was okay for her to send it back over to her daughter, but the reality was she had the ability. Miriam had the ability to distinguish between her sons and her daughter. This is a girl, you treat girls different. Because that's how her family treated her, as a matter of fact. She wanted to do all the things the boys wanted to do, and she couldn't. That's how her mother raised her, right? That's what all the records show. That's what the testimony of the brothers have shown.
That's what her mom said also.
Okay. So then you also said, well, you know, she didn't have this ability to figure out that maybe Nicole was someone that you needed to treat differently. She's a nurse, correct?
Correct. I'm not saying she didn't have the intellectual capacity. I'm saying she may not have had the emotional insight and the sensitivity that maybe other people might have.
Nurses, one of the qualities of nurses is empathy, correct?
I wouldn't say that's a general rule across the board among all healthcare professionals and nurses. I mean, that's not an occupational qualification to be a nurse, that you must have empathy, that you must be touchy-feely and lovey-dovey.
All right, you as clearly nurses cannot go around pushing and shoving their patients, correct?
They do not do that.
And so they can't go around calling their patients MFers or effing retards, correct?
Correct.
So she certainly knew how to conform her conduct. Just common sense would dictate to us that she knows how to conform her conduct
In a professional
in
setting,
a professional
yes.
setting.
Correct.
And as a nurse, especially the military nurse, she would have been exposed to probably more types of illnesses, correct?
I don't know that a military nurse has more experience than a nurse at Tampa General. I mean, I wouldn't say that.
Well, they probably see more PTSD, do they not, as a nurse in the military? And if you disagree, say that.
I'm saying that. No, I don't believe so. I mean, I've worked in the VA. I don't believe that PTSD is overrepresented in the hospital population in the military as opposed to, again, at Tampa General. I mean, we saw the same types of people. The PTSD may have been from sexual trauma or something else as opposed to military trauma, but I would say that as a population as a whole, PTSD is about 3% of the population, regardless if you're looking in the military or you're looking on the street. So I wouldn't make that kind of judgment.
Miss Dees was married to a person in the military through Joseph Carey Sr., correct?
Yes.
Miss Dees was married to Robert Dees, who was in the military as well as a law enforcement officer, correct?
Yes.
And Miss Dees had 2 children that went into the military, correct?
Which Miss Deans? Her mom?
Miriam Dees.
I don't know about her other son that got killed.
Okay. You didn't know that he was killed while he was in the military in a car accident? You didn't read that in the reports?
I didn't focus on that. I was focused more on why the accident occurred.
You were able to ascertain in talking to, and let me ask this question first. Your conversation that you had with Joseph Carey Jr. in order to fulfill your forensic evaluation data sources, that conversation was 3 hours long, correct?
Yes.
And so during those 3 hours, you would have talked about what his life was like with his biological father, correct?
Oh, no, we didn't talk about that.
What his life was with his biological mother, correct?
I did talk about that, yeah.
What his sister was like growing up,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, I did talk about that.
When you said that Nicole would spend summers with Joey, she would spend a portion of the summer with her brother at the request of her mother, correct?
And Joey, yeah, I mean, he wanted to see her, yeah.
But it was for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. At least that's how he testified. Did he say anything different to you that you need to share with us today?
I mean, it was like an entire month. I mean, it's a large portion of the summer, yeah.
And during that time period, especially the summer of August of 2015, right before 2015 August, he indicated to you that all these observations of hygiene and the computer and the food situation and the isolation and all those things like that, those were all observations that he was also making. The difference was he was redirecting his sister, correct?
Correct, he had made those observations that summer and the summer prior, yes.
In looking at the records, were you able to determine that Nicole Nachtman has attended 13 schools through her childhood?
I got that information today, yes.
By moving back and forth between Tampa and Virginia? You've ascertained that, correct?
Today, yes.
And you also were able to ascertain that her mother was being deployed a lot, correct?
Correct.
And all of these observations that are being made from the time of the Air Academy forward in terms of how she changed and became introverted, how she became more shy, the Air Academy saying that she was being bullied, and let me get you to agree to that first. The Air Academy records say that part of what was going on was bullying, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Right. And you also learned that the family didn't really want her to be at the Air Academy. They thought that she should be with them as opposed to a boarding school, correct?
Part of the family, yes. Grandma and the uncles, yes.
And you would agree with me that in your mind, your impression is that Miriam's brothers, Miriam's son Joey, and Miriam's mother were caring individuals for Nicole.
Yes.
I mean, they loved her, they care about her.
That's right, yep.
They wanted what was best for her, correct?
Everybody wanted what's best for her, yes.
However, it was Miriam, as the biological mother, that was making the decisions about how often Nicole would move, correct?
I don't know about that. I don't know what you mean.
Well, she's the mother.
Correct.
Her going between Florida and Virginia as many times as she did, that's the only person that could have made those decisions,
Yes. I wasn't sure if you meant other types of movement, yeah.
correct? And the same thing in terms of what schools that she was going to, correct?
Yes.
And did you also learn that Miriam, in fact, did know from family members that they had concerns about Nicole, that they had told Miriam their observations of Nicole?
In deposition, I've read that, yes.
Okay. You have no reason to disbelieve that at this point, correct?
Correct.
And so that, in fact, is, so when we talk about Nicole self-reporting the physical part, but there's no corroboration, let me just ask you this. Isn't it true that most battering of whether it be a child or a spouse does not occur in the presence of other people unless it's in the home?
I would agree with that, yes.
So if Nicole was being battered by Miriam when she was married to Bob, the only person that would have known that was Bob, correct?
Potentially, if it happened in front of him, yes.
The verbal abuse is substantiated and corroborated by the brothers, as well as by Joey, as well as by Nicole, correct?
Yes.
And in the Air Academy, when you were saying that, you know, Bob, there's some emails between Bob Deans, and we can't talk about the content of them,
Yes.
there is no indication in those records that either Miriam Deans or Bob Deans did anything about the bullying that Nicole was undergoing at the Air Academy, correct?
That's not true.
Who did? Which of those two individuals went to the school and did something about it?
They didn't go to the school. They wanted her to be moved from this girl. They were notified of it. They wanted her to be moved, and they were notified that she was moved out of the room.
And she continued to be bullied, and she continued to have inappropriate behavior there, correct?
Yes, she continued to have inappropriate behavior.
Over a 2-year period.
Yes.
And so the one thing is she got moved from one child to another to separate these two kids.
Correct. That's what the documentation shows.
Yet those two kids still were at the same school together, correct?
I believe so.
And as a matter of fact, it's a boarding school, correct?
Yes.
And by any chance, do you know how big the boarding school was in terms of how many kids there were?
I don't. I just know in that squadron there was like 29 or something with her.
So it's not like what you talked about in FSU where people get lost because there's thousands of people. This is a
That's
smaller
right.
school, smaller setting.
Correct.
She's still being exposed to whatever it is that is, whatever it is. Because right now, if I asked you, was she suffering from the beginnings of mental illness, what would you say?
Oh, certainly. These personality disorders that I've talked with you guys about today, they're certainly manifesting and starting to show as a teenager, and they go through adulthood. I mean, certainly at that time, it's becoming evident that she has those. Yes.
And as we sit here today, do you agree that genetics plays a role in mental illnesses or defects?
Certainly, yes. I agree.
And were you aware that on Miriam's, the mom's, well, Nicole's mom, Miriam, that one of the brothers was discharged for a for depression?
I did not know that.
And did you ever talk to Ronald Nachtman, Nicole's biological father?
No, I
yourself
watched
directly?
the videos.
You did watch
and
the
I
video.
read the deposition.
Okay. And would you agree with me that you made observations of Mr. Nachtman that you felt were indicative of some type of behavioral? You're not supposed to diagnose people just off of a video, so I'm not asking you that, and I don't want
Correct.
to draw an objection. But you certainly made certain observations from watching the video and reading the deposition, correct?
Oh, yes. And reading the psychological evaluation in the court file. Yep.
In your opinion, can a child at the age of 3 or 4 be affected by physical abuse that is occurring in their presence? Not to them, but in their presence.
I would say no.
And so when people talk about that abuse is a cycle, family to family, generation to generation, at what age is a child affected by the physical abuse that is occurring in a home?
I would say when they can remember it. And I specifically talked with Nicole about that, and she said her first memories are when she's in 3rd grade, so she doesn't recall anything before age 8.
Now, you also learn in reviewing of the records that Miriam took, Nicole's mother,
Yes, that's what
Miriam
I'm
Dean,
assuming. Yeah.
took steps, evasive steps, to ensure that Nicole's biological father could not have any interaction with her, correct?
Yes.
And you also learned, as a result of a review of everything in front of you that you had available to you, that Nicole knew that she was not to have interaction with her biological father, correct?
Yes.
Would it not make sense to you that she would have been given the basis for why that contact had been terminated?
Yes, and that's documented in the Florida Air Academy records.
And again, although I'm trying not to be repetitive, all of that was because of allegations against each other of all kinds of aspects, correct? Between her biological mother and biological father, correct?
I thought the reason was because he had taken another child.
In the custody battles, Mr. Nachtman's rights to that child was terminated to Nicole, correct?
Yes.
Now, when Nicole comes back, well, let me take you to London for just a minute.
Yes.
Did you learn, as a result of your long conversation with Joseph Carey, that really the transportation plans as well as the cost of these summer trips were all covered by Miriam? In other words, she would make the arrangements, correct?
That's right, yes.
Okay. So again, it would make sense that Miriam would make the arrangements, and I mean Mrs. Deans,
That's
would
right.
make the arrangements for Nicole to travel to London, correct?
Yes, she made the arrangements.
Right. And based on, I guess, what you indicated on direct, that you have experience, a little bit of experience in the studying abroad, when you study abroad and you're sending these 17, 18-year-old kids abroad, the school takes a lot of steps to ensure that there is some type of containment of the kids in order to ensure for their safety, correct?
I believe so.
So usually what that means is they send them to a particular university, correct?
Yes.
They sleep in a particular place.
Yes.
They go to a limited number of classes, correct?
Yes.
They're afforded an opportunity to get some type of meal plan.
Yes.
And although you have some freedom, the reality of it is the school assumes some responsibility for their safety, correct?
Some, yes.
That's not to say that Nicole didn't leave the building where she had classes and go buy food somewhere.
Right.
But it is a much more structured than when you head out to the big campus of Florida State University, correct?
I do not believe so. No, I don't believe that there's more structure in the location in another country than there is on the campus of FSU.
When you go study abroad, they have all the classes pretty much always in the same building, don't they, as opposed to where you travel across the campus?
I don't know that. I tried to ask Nicole about some of that stuff. She didn't really tell me about that.
What she did tell you, though, was there was a significant difference between what she was experiencing in London
Emotionally.
and how emotionally,
Yes.
and how Florida State University hit her when she went there, correct?
Correct.
And if these signs of deterioration, or, well, if these signs such as the hygiene and not following through on things and not being able to self-direct herself, if all these things started happening somewhere after London, you would agree with me that when Nicole returned home, whether it be for Thanksgiving, Christmas, summer, if Miriam Deans was living in the same home with Nicole, that she should have made these observations, correct?
I would believe that she would make those observations, or Nicole's behavior changed when she was around her mother because she knew her mother had certain standards.
Well, but we have the brothers that say that even when they went to visit Miriam and Bob and Nicole at the home that they lived at, that she still was disengaged from the family. So you have independent proof or independent testimony that's saying She was as she was, and she didn't change.
That's
Okay?
her personality style, yes.
Okay, now you're calling that her personality style. You realize other people are calling it the mental health deterioration and the signs of schizophrenia. You understand that there is a difference here in these opinions, correct?
Yes, I understand that there's a difference in opinions.
Because when I think about personalities, I think about my outgoing
The
personality.
objection was sustained.
Right. So when we talk about these things, you have to acknowledge that Bob Deans and Miriam Deans were having to watch and see the same things that the Lear family were seeing.
I
Correct?
believe they were, yes.
And there is no evidence that either one of those two individuals took any intervention on behalf of Nicole subsequent to London, even if we don't talk about her childhood. Subsequent to London, there's no intervention, correct?
It depends upon what you mean by intervention.
Was there any mental health counseling?
Well, there was no mental health counseling.
Was there any evaluation?
No, but Miriam was trying to intervene by enforcing certain rules, providing certain clothes, trying to make Nicole look more appropriate to other people, trying to teach her how to act appropriately to others, trying to demonstrate that, trying to teach her that this is the way you need to act in order to be more liked among other people, because she knew it was a problem Nicole had. She didn't go to get things psychiatrically because in her culture that's sort of not accepted in a Puerto Rican culture, but she was trying to do what she felt that she could do to make Nicole more acceptable and get the things that she wanted out of life. That's what she was trying to do. So those are the interventions she was making. Because they weren't psychiatric doesn't mean that they didn't exist.
Dr. Lazaro,
Yes.
Nicole Nachtman has never in her life been obese, correct?
I don't know that. Well, she was,
Well, was she
no.
obese at the time that her mother had her have liposuction against her will?
I don't know what her weight was at the time.
100, you want me to show you the records or no? 132 pounds.
I would say she was overweight but not obese.
Do you feel that liposuction against someone's will is something that should happen because you want them
No.
to look different?
No, but Nicole did not tell me that that was what happened.
But you've had significant records, including a 52-page report from Dr. Heidi, where all sorts of things were spoken about, correct?
Correct, but
Right,
even her
let me ask you
college.
this, ma'am, you wear glasses, correct?
Yes, I do.
By choice.
100%. But well, I mean, I need glasses. Yeah, I mean they're bifocals. I need them. Yeah.
And again, Nicole expressed to you the fear she had about having anyone touch her eyes, do anything.
Yes.
May seem trivial to some people, but for Nicole that was a real fear, correct?
That's right.
And again, because her mother wanted her to look a certain way, that was going to have to be the choice that Nicole had to live with, correct?
I wouldn't say it was just due to looks. There were other practical things that even Nicole had talked to me about that were talked about in relation to the surgery.
Whatever the practical things were, the bottom line is Nicole did not want the surgery in fear, correct?
That's right.
And at 25 years of age, at 21 years of age, I'm sorry, again, she's an adult, and because her mother wants something, she has to do it. You acknowledge that the mother was controlling.
I do believe she was controlling because she felt that she had to be, because she didn't feel that Nicole could handle things without her intervention.
How does liposuction help or LASIK help Nicole with her hygiene?
I don't believe that either of them help. Well, I mean, the LASIK could help with hygiene. You don't have to deal with the glasses, but I don't believe that that was the reason for those.
How does liposuction or LASIK surgery in any way help her navigate better at Florida State University in terms of not sleeping all day, being on a computer all night, and missing classes? How do either of those two things help her in that area?
Her mom didn't know about that. Nicole was covering up her grades. She was telling her everything was fine.
Hygiene was consistent for how many years, and what you're suggesting here today is that the mother did not in any way know about the hygiene problem?
I don't know how she looked whenever she was with her mother. I really don't. I do know that when she was not with her mother, when she was at college, that's when it seemed to be the worst, when there was nobody overseeing her.
The reality of it is that unfortunately Miriam Deans traveled a lot because of her work, correct?
That's right.
And again, you don't have any personal knowledge of Robert Deans actually saying to Nicole, hey Nicole, every day that you're here with me, you got to take a bath. None of that exists, correct?
I have no knowledge of that, correct.
You also have family members that have said that they brought these things to Miriam's attention. And they talked about how Nicole was needing help, correct?
That's what they said, yes.
And yet the help didn't seem to come through, not according to Julie Holt, according to the family.
I agree with you. Yes, that's what they report in the depositions, yep.
And you would agree with me that the verbal abuse is significant in Nicole Nachtman's mind, correct?
Yes, due to her personality style, she was particularly sensitive to negative feedback.
You indicated on direct that you were abused at some point at work. Can't remember which one you said.
Yeah, I alluded to that in medical school.
Okay.
That's sort of the way we're trained.
Okay, and did you like that treatment?
No.
However, you're a strong enough person to fight back for that, correct?
Well, I did what I could.
Oh, I mean, you do, you know.
Well, I mean, I have a strong personality, as you might know.
As a matter of fact, Nicole Nachtman's mother would encourage her to take laxatives and pills, over-the-counter pills, in order to affect her weight, correct?
Her mom taught her about laxatives. Nicole took it upon herself to get the over-the-counter diet pills.
Well, let's just stick to the laxative then.
Okay.
Do you think that that is an appropriate thing for a mother to do, again with a child that, or again with a daughter that does not have the wherewithal to oppose it? Do you think that's an appropriate thing?
I don't think it's appropriate for an adult to do that to a child, no, because there's a lot of medical things that could be caused due to that, and a child's not going to understand that. So I would say no, that's wrong.
Now, although we debated a little bit the whether it's screaming or voices or whatever, Nicole did report to you hearing sounds like a high-pitched flat line at least since she returned from London, correct?
Yes.
And although you don't believe it to be true that Miriam Deans would kill Nicole, Nicole has been consistent in saying that she feared that her mother was going to kill her for a significant period of time, correct?
No. For a significant period of time?
This incident happened 4 years ago.
Oh, you're talking, I thought you were talking about at the time of the offense, if you're saying significant period of time before that.
It was a fear that she had at the time based on the verbal abuse, based on the physical abuse, based on whatever had created that fear, and it has stayed consistent through 2019, correct?
Her report, yes.
You acknowledge that during your interviews of Nicole, she would go off on tangents and you would have to redirect her, correct?
Yes.
You believe that Nicole displays inappropriate affect, correct?
Correct.
You believe that she's depressed and sad and unhappy?
Now or prior?
Prior and
Yes.
now. Yes?
I would say prior, yes. I wouldn't say now, yes.
Nicole appeared to have a lot of anxiety around her because of the manner in which her mother engaged with her, correct?
I believe it was due to her personality style, that she has a nervous personality style, which is avoidant.
Is it not true that most parents, if they know that their child reacts poorly to yelling and screaming, if they want to make a difference in having that child hear them, that they will find another way to talk to them?
Most parents, you said?
I hope so.
You qualified it with most parents. You said, I hope so, but unfortunately, in my clinical experience, that is not the case.
Okay, and that's because you're seeing people that have problems,
Correct.
just like Nicole Nachtman, correct?
Well, some of them do, yeah.
You cannot argue that her grades show from the first semester to the very last, 5 semesters, a constant decline in grades. You cannot argue against that, correct?
I'm not arguing with you on that. No, that's correct.
You can't deny that Nicole, even when you were talking to her, has talked to you and told you she feels empty. She has a chronic feeling of emptiness, correct?
She didn't say that. That was my impression.
You also have observed yourself personally the unusual mannerisms and bizarre behavior that Dr. Heidi observed in Nicole, and you totally agree that those observations from Dr. Heidi that she testified to actually existed and continue to exist when you interviewed her, correct?
Not bizarre behavior. She is odd, but I never said that she had bizarre behavior. I believe Dr. Heidi was using that description to talk about how she believed Nicole was in the police interrogation video as bizarre. I don't agree with that.
Now, Nicole told you that she had opened all the windows in the house so she could escape when her mother came home, correct?
Yes.
And Nicole also told you that she heard a noise, she heard like a trash bag or a ruffle, and so she assumed that her mom was in the home and she panicked, correct?
Yes.
And that's consistent with one of the photographs that shows not only Miss Deans' purse, but a bag that was found right next to it in one of the photographs taken by a crime scene technician, correct?
Correct.
Nicole also told you about her mother finding her with a gun and pills, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that her mother asked her, do you need help? Nicole said no. And that then her mother took her to learn how to shoot the gun, correct?
Yes, when she got home.
You've also heard Nicole talk to you about the suicidal thoughts that she has had, correct?
On the day of the incident? The first incident?
So,
Or otherwise.
So in close proximity to the incidents, correct? She talked
did
about
say that.
having suicidal thoughts.
Correct, she did say that.
Having a gun and having pills, sleeping pills, could be a red flag for suicidal thoughts, correct?
Certainly, that's why her mom asked her if she needed help.
And did you feel it was appropriate for the conversation to end there and for her mother to tell her how to shoot the gun or show her how to shoot the gun? Do you think that was the appropriate response? Because Nicole said no.
I do not believe that was an appropriate response. I do not know that that happened, but I do not believe that would be an appropriate response if it did happen.
If it happened, It's not appropriate, correct?
Correct.
And it's also true that individuals who are contemplating suicide quite often vacillate, go back and forth, and it's something that they struggle with sometimes for maybe years.
Certainly.
Correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Again, as a part of a mental illness, correct?
It doesn't even have to be a part of a mental illness. It could be just, again, as we've talked about, a personality disorder that they, and I guess that's considered a mental illness, so yeah.
So I guess I better make this clear. You are agreeing with prong 1 of the insanity.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when I believe you previously testified, I'm getting a little mixed up if it was today, that Joey would tell you that his mother would tell him at the end of a phone conversation, "I love you."
I was in my deposition.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
you previously have testified that Joey told you that, correct?
Yes.
Right. But to say it in person felt awkward.
Correct.
And so there's no reason or evidence for you to believe that in any way Miriam Deans treated Nicole differently by telling her, for instance, "I love you" on a daily basis, correct?
Can you,
Because that just seemed to be Miriam Deans' style.
could you repeat that for me?
Right.
He's objective.
Yes. I want to take you back for just a moment when I talked to you and asked you a question about whether or not Nicole indicated to you that she just felt hopeless and dead and empty inside. And let me just show you something to refresh your recollection. I think it's either starred or highlighted. And to see if that helps you, your recollection, in terms of whether or not Nicole said that.
That was after she killed her parents, so that's different from her natural feeling throughout the rest of her life. This was after she killed her parents. That's how she felt, hopeless and dead and empty inside.
So I need to ask you if you ever were provided by the state what has been introduced into evidence as the state's exhibit number 70, and I'll just put it in front of you for a minute. I think it's something like 200, a little over 200 text messages.
I never received this until I'm just now looking at it. I know it's been alluded to in another testimony.
And I think, I think what you're referring to is where, hey, call me, or hey, you know, I'll send you money, or hey, that kind of testimony?
That's
Is that what you were remembering?
Yes.
Would it surprise you that in all of these text messages, there's only one time the word love, and it's from Nicole Nachtman to her mother, and no response from the mother?
Would it surprise me? that what you asked? Yes.
Well, if you want to peruse through this in any way, but I'm going to keep asking some questions
Sure.
because it is introduced into evidence. Would you agree with me that there was not an emotional bond between Miriam Deans and her mother? And Nicole Nachtman?
Would I agree that there was not an emotional bond?
Yes.
No, I would not agree with that.
The offering of computers and money, food, shelter, things of that sort, those go to the responsibility a parent has to care for the child, correct?
You would hope that a parent would care for their child that way, that well. Yes.
The other part of a parent's responsibility is ensuring that a child has self-esteem, correct?
That's the parent's responsibility?
Well, do you believe that we're born genetically with self-esteem?
Yes.
Okay, and so that self-esteem can be destroyed by a person physically and verbally abusing you, correct?
Could be affected, yeah.
And would you agree with me that it is not a parent's responsibility to do that to a child?
To do what?
To ruin their self-esteem that they're biologically given.
It's not the job of the parent to do that, if that's what you asked me.
To destroy it, you mean, or to affect it or something?
It's not the job of the parent to destroy their child's self-esteem. I thought that's what you asked me.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure we're agreeing on.
Yes, I agree on that.
Now, since you've been talking about personalities, in your conversations with Joey made it very clear to you that his personality and his self-esteem and his self-worth are different than Nicole's, correct?
I didn't really talk with him too much about his own personality.
Well, you talked to him for 3 hours.
Yeah, I did
Talked
talk
to
to him.
Nicole for 14 hours.
Yes.
Is there not a significant difference between the two children?
There is a significant difference. Well, there is a difference between the two children. I mean, there's very basic that different sexes, and they're different ages. There's a lot of differences.
That's not what I mean. So, he comes across more self-confident, correct?
He comes across as honest and genuine.
He comes
Yes.
across more self-confident, correct?
I would not say that he was self-confident. That was not something that would project out to me, no.
He doesn't seem to have any problems with self-esteem, correct?
I did not perceive that he had problems with self-esteem.
He's successful in the military.
I don't know how he's doing in the military. I imagine he is successful. He's been
He's
there
a
for a while.
captain. Did he not talk to you about where he is?
No, this guy is a humble man. No, he did
Okay.
not.
If he's testified to being a captain in the service, you would agree that that's successful, correct?
Yes,
He's married,
yes,
so that means he has the ability to create relationships, correct?
yes,
He has 2 children, correct?
yes.
Did he indicate to you that he's raising his children differently than he was raised and Nicole was raised?
We did not talk about that.
So you didn't ask that question knowing the dynamics of not only the Lair family, the Dean's Nachtman family, and the fact that we had insanity and battered child syndrome in this case?
What I was trying to find out from him was exactly looking at the insanity issue and looking at how Nicole was, in his opinion, what he saw, her behaviors and things like that over the course of time that he knew each other, more specifically around the time of the offense. That's what I was looking at.
And you would agree with me that a lay person has no idea what psychosis is, correct?
A layperson does not, right?
And you would agree with me that a lay person, that as a lay person, he certainly observed the changes in his sister, correct, over time?
Yes.
And that those changes had concerned him, correct?
He didn't talk about it as a concern, but he did tell me that he had done interventions with her, yeah, while she was with him. I mean, he loves her.
Okay, the interventions that were done were, hey, go take a bath, you stink.
Correct. He was making rules for her because he knew she had the capability of doing these things, but she was not doing these things. So he gave her rules to follow in his household. That these are the behaviors appropriate for somebody in our household to be doing.
Okay, and you've previously testified in August of 2015 that you agree that Joey told the police that Nicole was terribly afraid of their mother, correct?
Wait, reverse. What did you
You
say?
have previously testified that Joey told the police that Nicole was terribly afraid of her mother, their mother, in August of 2015. You've previously acknowledged that, correct? In the deposition.
Okay.
You said that to law enforcement.
I thought you were saying I testified in August 2015.
No.
Okay.
Yes?
He said that to police.
Yes?
Yes.
Did you talk to Joey about why he chose to live with his grandmother and his uncle that was living there on and off during the time period of his high school years?
He volunteered to me.
Don't tell me what he said. Just
Okay.
say, did you talk to him about it?
He volunteered that to me, yes.
And again, that was even though he had his biological mother and biological father still living, correct?
Yes.
I think you testified on direct that you see that Nicole is weak and that any person could see that, correct?
I don't know if I said weak. I thought I said meek.
Meek. As it relates to the battered child syndrome, first of all, you've made a correlation between battered child syndrome and battered spouse syndrome. I'd like for you to direct me to some type of publication or some type of article or something, or the DSMV that says that those two things are in any way related to each other in the same sense of a cycle of violence.
I don't have any publications or anything that would alert me to that.
As a matter of fact, you previously testified that Dr. Kathleen Heidi is the renowned expert in the area of battered child syndrome, correct?
That's right. She's a world-known expert in that. Yep.
And you have acknowledged that don't remember the exact title, but talking about the development, the maturity development tool that's used by Dr. Heidi, that number one, you don't use it, correct?
Yes.
You're not trained on it, correct?
Yes.
However, she has used it for 40 years, correct?
Correct.
And as a matter of fact, most individuals in the world of psychology, in fact, are aware of that instrument, whether they use it or not. It's in the psychological testing world, not psychiatric world, correct?
I have spoken to several friends that were psychologists when I had this issue before to try to figure it out, and they said no.
So the judge has been pretty good on no hearsay.
Okay. So you asked me about psychologists. So.
It's a psychologist testing instrument, correct? Or not? It's an instrument used by psychologists, absolutely not used in the world of psychiatry.
Dr. Heidi's not a psychologist. She's a licensed mental health counselor.
I know that. So does the jury. They heard that yesterday.
Okay.
The question is it not used in the field of psychology? And if you don't know, you don't know.
I'm not a psychologist, so no, I would say I don't know.
Okay. So you agree that children or kids who suffer from battered child syndrome, there's usually a pattern of family violence.
Are you asking me a question?
Yes. Do you agree?
That in children with battered child syndrome, there's a family history of violence? Is that what you said?
You agree that kids who suffer from battered child syndrome, there is a pattern of family violence, page 164, in case you need it, Mr. Terry.
Is this is from Dr. Heidi's list?
The question is, you said battered child syndrome does not apply in this case, correct?
Correct.
You don't think that Nicole Nachtman's a battered child, even though we've talked about the physical and verbal abuse?
Correct.
Didn't rise to the level of the violence that you think is necessary or the verbal abuse that you think is necessary, correct?
Correct.
All right. Do you agree that kids who suffer from battered child syndrome will sometimes exhibit the following characteristics? A pattern of family violence, yes or no?
Yes.
The use or attempt to obtain help from other people but fail.
Yes.
Or no?
Yes.
Their efforts to escape their family situation fail, like running away, suicide attempts, yes or no?
Yes.
The youth is isolated from other people, yes or no?
Yes.
Home life becomes increasingly intolerable, yes or no? Or yeah or no?
The home environment becomes increasingly intolerable. Yes.
The youth feels trapped and helpless.
Yes.
And that a child who suffers from battered child, the parent's death frequently is perceived as relief to them.
Yes.
And I found what it is. So it's the level of personality development. You previously testified you're not an expert at this interpersonal level of maturity theory, correct?
That's correct.
And so you really can't make too much of an opinion about what Dr. Heidi is saying about that because you don't know enough about it. You previously testified to that, correct?
Yes.
I might have them. Oh, I'm sorry. I had a couple, two or three more things to cover.
Sure.
Areas, real quick.
Sure.
You indicated on direct that you have been published.
Yes.
Can you tell me how many times, and can you share with me the subject matters?
I believe 3 times. One is about a schizophrenic person and the treatment that was given. He had, the article I believe is entitled something about the auto amputation of the penis. He had cut his penis off. This was a patient of mine due to psychosis. That's one. Another one was medical consequences of crystal meth, making crystal meth. That was another patient of mine. And then the other one is about juvenile sexual murderers.
And where was that article published?
I don't remember the journal right now off the top of my head.
And when was that, if you can recall?
This was after I left my fellowship a couple years, I think 2010.
And when we were talking about the associations that you belong to, there's also on your CV that you pay fees for federal and state controlled substance purposes.
What?
You pay fees in order to, or to the federal and state government dealing with controlled substances.
I don't understand what that
Do you
means.
in any way dispense medication?
No, I
during
used
your-
to. I used to.
As a psychiatrist, you no longer dispense medication, is that correct?
I prescribe medication. I thought that what you're talking about, because I was doing Suboxone treatment in my office for some patients, I actually had a Suboxone dose in my office, and I had to, the government came in and checked and made sure I had the right medicine and stuff. That's what I thought you were talking about. Otherwise, I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. Nope, it was on your CV, so I just wanted to clarify what it is.
It was? I would like to see it. I don't, I don't remember it's on there, but.
Email you that. So, I want to talk to you a little bit real quickly. Dr. Heidi has been seeing Nicole since August of 2015, correct?
Yes,
You really kind of saw her all the way through probably January of this year, correct?
yes,
And you've indicated that there hasn't been a diagnosis by the jail. Mental health evaluations by the jail are done once a year, correct?
no,
By the jail. Not by us, by the jail.
No, I'm saying no to that.
And how often do they do those mental health evaluations?
As needed. So when she originally came in, she was seen, I believe, every day for
And
an extended
during
period
that
of time.
And during that time period, initially, they were talking about that she was in a suicide, you remember that she was in a suicide suit?
Right, that's purely because people that have committed crimes like that in a specific age, we have a protocol in the jail that if people meet certain criteria, they automatically get put in a suicide cell because they meet certain criteria and their risk is very high just getting into jail. So that's standard, yes.
And that Nicole, in fact, did talk about having heard voices initially, correct?
Exactly, I said that. She reported this screams, the same thing.
Okay. And again, the people at the jail, so she's in lockdown, correct?
Well,
And
she's,
people around her are like Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office employees, and they wear uniforms. So she knows there's law enforcement all around her, correct?
right, I mean, she's in a single cell, she's in a suicide gown, and people are monitoring her and make sure she's okay, yeah.
And Dr. Ewing testified today that one of the real problems facing Nicole is, number one, she herself doesn't want the stigma of having a mental illness, correct?
Yeah,
And that's what he testified to, correct?
yes.
And that doesn't bode well for her prognosis in dealing with the schizophrenia that he has diagnosed her with, as has Dr. Heidi, correct? You would agree with that. Not that you agree with schizophrenia,
Yeah.
but you agree that that would be a bad prognosis.
Well, it's a bad prognosis for any psychiatric illness. If they don't agree that they have an illness and they're not accepting treatment, then it's a bad prognosis for any illness because they're not going to get treatment for that illness. It's the same thing with diabetes or anything else.
Well, I
Yeah.
just want to make sure. So it's consistent with what Dr. Ewing has said, that Nicole has not been diagnosed by someone else, or because they haven't done a forensic evaluation of her as you and Dr. Ewing and Dr. Heidi did. Their evaluation is different, is it not?
They are doing a clinical evaluation like I would in my office outside of this forensic setting, which is a clinical examination for treatment.
And the jail cannot force medication to Nicole Nachtman, correct?
No, she asked for medication at one point.
Yes, I'm getting there.
Okay.
That was for depression, and that she wanted to sleep.
Well, she said actually what she told me was that she wanted to get up earlier because she was sleeping all day.
Why don't we go by what the records say? What did the records say? That they did that because she was still hearing voices, she had to sleep, and they thought she was depressed.
It was not due to hearing voices. She was given that medication because of her reports of, let's see.
And again, her reports are then supported by whatever it is that the jail personnel are seeing, correct?
Right, and I've also said that she had a mood problem at that time. Yeah, that's not an issue. Yeah, that's what they're giving her medication for. She appeared to be depressed in the context of the situation. They started her medication to see if that would be helpful to her. And it was, at least Nicole had reported initially that it was.
And one last question.
Yes.
There's a period of time, were you aware of the period of time where Miriam Deans and her son Joey did not speak for 2 or 3 years?
Yes, I know that.
Without telling me what Joey said or didn't say about that, you would agree with me that a parent and a child not speaking for 2 or 3 years is fairly significant, correct?
I don't know that's true.
So Miriam Deans is not lovey-dovey, according to you. She's not that kind of person. She won't talk to her son for 2 or 3 years for whatever reason. And you believe that that would be indicative of someone who could nurture and develop and care for someone such as Nicole Nachtman?
I don't know how you're making that extrapolation. I don't know how those two equal each other.
You can just say no. You can
I
say,
don't know, based upon what you're saying. I don't know how you're making those two connections like
if
that.
she didn't talk to Joey Carey Jr. for 3 years, 2 or 3 years, who is successful in life, who she sends her daughter to every summer, who is married and has his own children, again, how can that type of a person be good for this type of a child, Nicole Nachtman?
Judge, I'm going to object to the relevance at this point. Hold on.
I don't understand.
Wait, no, wait.
Oh,
There's
sorry,
an
Judge.
objection right now.
So we're going to try to rephrase?
Yeah, please rephrase it. I guess we're retreating from the one last question.
I'm trying.
I tell attorneys never say that because it's never true.
I will do better next time.
It's all right.
So you acknowledge that Miriam Deans did not speak to Joey Carey Jr. for 2 to 3 years?
I've read that, yeah.
Well, you read it, and had you wanted to talk about it with him, you could have in that three-hour conversation, correct?
Certainly could have. I was more focused on Nicole, yeah.
Joey is one of 2 children that Miriam Deans had that could talk to you about what the relationship was between a mother and her children in that particular family setting, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And if Joseph, you'll agree with me that Joseph Carey Jr. seems to be well adjusted to life and doing fairly well.
Oh, yeah.
You'll also agree with me that in August of 2015, Nicole Nachtman was not well adjusted and not doing well in life for whatever reason.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
And if Nicole Nachtman knew that her mother did not talk to Joey for 2 to 3 years for whatever the reason was, do you not think that that would have an effect in how Nicole Nachtman would perceive her mother and her failures in life?
Her mother and her mother's failures, or her mother and Nicole's failures? I don't understand the question, I'm sorry.
Well, everybody's talked about Nicole's perceived fear of her mother.
Correct.
If you don't talk to your own son that's doing well in life for 2 or 3 years, the child who has lost her bike, the child who's got failing grades, the child who can't take care of herself, the child who all the roommates have discussed, in their opinion, these are people that barely knew her. She could not navigate herself through Florida State University's day-to-day activities. That person, you think, would not be in fear that those failures would impact her relationship with her mother?
Oh, certainly. I mean, that,
Thank you very much. Judge, I'm done.
Redirect? Yes, Judge.
And I'm going to be brief. Don't worry.
I don't have any problems.
Careful.
You mentioned earlier, there was some discussion earlier about Nicole Nachtman. Some people talking about her mumbling to herself, how she would be looking down on the computer and kind of words, she'd be saying stuff sometimes you couldn't tell. Doctor, is it common for some people to talk to themselves, to work things out?
Yes.
With a person with the avoidant personality disorder that you described, is it even more common for people like that to do that?
I wouldn't say it's more common. I just think it's common among people to do that, to talk to themselves, to work things out.
And when it came to the liposuction, did Nicole ever tell you that she was forced to get it?
No, she didn't say that.
And in fact, she told Laura Hessmer, what did she tell Laura Hessmer?
I'm going to object to the,
Okay,
we changed it. No, that's okay.
What did she tell Laura Hessmer regarding the liposuction?
Let me get to that.
And if y'all could refer me to a page so that
I don't know what the page is. Oh, it's page 23 on Laura's deposition.
Thank you, ma'am.
She had it when she was younger because she was a lot heavier. She told me that she had it done. She lost a lot of weight. She felt a lot better about herself. She felt lighter, and she could actually eat.
Okay. And that's what she told Laura regarding liposuction.
Yeah.
Now, regarding the glasses, do you know whether Nicole liked wearing glasses?
I don't believe she liked wearing glasses.
Judge, that calls for speculation, and based on the answer, I think that's appropriate.
Nicole,
Well, I'll caution the witness not to speculate.
no, Nicole told me that, Judge. I'm sorry. We
Well,
talked about that.
Let's be clear.
We talked about that specifically.
Okay. What did she tell you specifically? Did she like wearing glasses or not?
She didn't like wearing glasses because she likes to exercise, and she felt like that was, sort of getting in the way of that. And she really wanted contacts, was one of the things that she really wanted. She didn't want to go through the exam where they do that blow of air on your eyeball, the ocular pressure exam. So it took a long time for her to get contacts because of that.
The police interrogation video, what you described earlier, I believe, with Ms. Holt, that you found that she did not display any symptoms of schizophrenia or psychosis in the police interrogation video. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And why do you say that?
Because she was not psychotic in the interview. She was not attending to anything else than what they were speaking about. She was answering the questions. She was in the here and now in the conversation. There was no evidence of psychosis in that interview.
Nothing further.
Just very briefly, Judge.
Well,
Doctor, if you could, do you still have that portion of the deposition of Laura Hessmer regarding the liposuction?
Yeah.
If you could just finish reading the entire, I guess the entire paragraph of that.
Okay.
Ooh, there's just a couple more lines.
I only have one quote of it. She can actually eat. But then she was like, it's still not enough. She had to wear weights.
Judge Enfield.
all right, may the witness be excused by the state
Yes, Your Honor.
and the defense?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, doctor. You may step down.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am going to send you home for the evening. I am going to instruct you not to discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Also, not to do any research related to the case, and please avoid any exposure to any reports about the case. I am going to ask Miss Allison Ballister to stay behind so we have some discussion. I think you had indicated you might have a conflict, so we're going to discuss that with you. The rest of the jury may be excused. All rise for the jury. Jury's exited. Everyone may be seated. Ms. Ballister, you can have a seat as well. Doctor, you can step down. You're not going to interfere with us packing up your stuff and walking out. Ms. Ballister, the Deputy Oliver indicated to me the other day, and I shared it with the attorneys, that you indicated that you were leaving tomorrow at noon, I believe, on vacation.
Jury instruction adequately explains premeditation. There's 2 paragraphs in the standard jury instruction on first-degree murder for premeditation, adequately conveying what the Supreme Court has determined should be told to the jury as far as what the definition of premeditation is. And it's just the state's position that if that's adequate in the standard jury instruction, the standard jury instruction should be given. And there's no need for a proposed special instruction in this case.
Good, I just want to put the 2 cases I cited, which are Hofert, 617 Southern 2nd, 1046. It's a Florida Supreme Court case from 1993. And Norton, 1709 Southern 2nd, 87. Again, a Florida Supreme Court, 1997. Both cases hold that a defendant attempting to conceal a crime or taking steps to conceal evidence of a crime does not establish that the murder was committed with a preconceived plan or design. Efforts to conceal evidence of premeditated murder are likely to be as consistent with efforts to avoid prosecution for an unlawful killing, and we're asking that the jury be instructed as such.
And Judge, my only response to that would be that that's case law, that's
Right.
not.
So it's not necessarily that they're proposing an inaccurate statement of the law.
Well, I believe that that's what's stated in case law. What's stated, there's plenty of things that are stated in the opinions in case law that are not a part of the jury instruction.
No question about
that's
that.
my only response is.
But I mean, what I'm trying to get at is if they were to make that argument, you would not be able to stand up and object misstatement of the law.
If they were to make that argument to the jury.
Right, during closing.
No, but I don't think that I would agree that that us arguing case law to the jury is necessarily, appropriate. We should argue the facts and evidence and how it pertains to the instructions that the jury is going to be given.
Well, but one of the objections that's common during closing is misstatement of the law.
Absolutely.
So but if that's the law, whether it's case law or whether it's statutory law, I want to know whether it's in fact the law.
If you're asking if Ms. Hersey argues that to the jury in closing argument, just kind of as a general, based on the facts we have here, you're not going to see that in the standard jury, that kind of thing. No, I wouldn't object to it because I agree that that is what the law says. I just think that the standard jury instructions, the Supreme Court has said this is what we believe the jury should be instructed on as far as what premeditation is. And they have not chosen to include that, even though it is a part of case law.
Right.
So I don't believe it's necessary.
Right. Anything else from the defense?
No, sir.
I would not sustain an objection that it's a misstatement of the law, but I do believe the Supreme Court has given us standard jury instructions that cover the definition, and they have never chosen to add that additional factor, and there's no cases, those were not jury instruction cases.
Yes, sir.
They're just cases that assert the law. So you're free to argue it, but I'm not going to instruct it. I'm not going to change the standard.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I now have the stack. Both of you have stacks of...
Yes, I do.
Jury instruction.
Got it.
They don't have page numbers, but I'm starting with 2.7 closing argument if you have that.
Yeah, it's the actual final version. Yeah. Yeah, and Courtney sent it over to
Ms. Schlemmer's going to handle for the defense.
All right. Mr. Schlemmer, what I had intended to do was just flip through them. I was told the preface to this was that everybody was in agreement, but I'm not comfortable with just that. I want to flip through each one of them. I also want to go over the verdict form specifically.
Yes, we went over that as well, the verdict form, Ms. Derry and I.
I appreciate that, Ms. Schlemmer, so welcome aboard. Starting at 2.7, closing argument. If you want, if I just read them, if you can just put on the record, no objection.
From both sides, Judge? Or?
Let's do it, yeah.
Sure. As to 2.7, no objection from the state.
No objection from the defense.
3.1, introduction to final instructions.
No objection from
No
the
objection.
defense.
3.2, statement of charge.
No objection from the defense.
No objection.
Next, I have 7.1, introduction to homicide. It also includes justifiable homicide, and excusable homicide.
That's correct, Your Honor, no objection. by
No
the defense.
objection.
All right. Next, I have, as to count 1, 7.2, murder first degree.
There's no objection, and we have included the heat of passion, which the state agrees to.
Judge, our only thought is that I feel like at this point, I had told him initially that I didn't have a problem with it, but I don't know that I believe at this point it applies to Robert Deans.
Is this Robert? Count 1?
Count 1 is
Yes.
Robert. I do not disagree that it would apply to Miriam, based on what the defense's argument is at this point, but I don't believe there's any evidence for heat of passion
Is it
for
your
Robert.
position, heat of passion on Robert Deans?
I'm thinking.
Okay.
I can see the smoke.
I mean, if you don't intend to argue that, then there's no need for it.
Judge, I guess just only because, the evidence from the experts is that Ms. Nachman, overhears this conversation between him and mom, and it's about financial stuff, and in her head, she's thinking he's an extension of mom, and he's gonna help cover it up if they both kill her. So, I mean, that evidence has been elicited today. And so, in an abundance of caution, I think it should be given. It's up to the jury as to what weight they give it.
Anything else from the state?
Judge, just that we don't think it applies to Robert Deans.
I'm gonna include it, you can argue that to the jury. 7.2 as to count 2.
No objection from this.
No objection.
3.3D, possession of a firearm and discharge causing death.
We believe that the defense believes it is an accurate statement.
No objection.
Next, I have 3.4, when there are lesser included crimes or attempts, and the 2 lessers that I have specifically indicated are second-degree murder and manslaughter.
Correct, no objection.
No objection.
Next, I have 7.4, murder, which is the lesser, as to count 1, 7.4, murder second degree.
Correct, no objection from the defense.
No objection.
Next, I have lesser as to count 2, 7.4, murder second degree.
No objection.
No objection.
And I've looked over these, at least the preliminary ones. The really only difference in these is the changing of the degree of what count it is and the name. Other than that, they're pretty much the
You
same.
mean between the 2 counts?
Right.
Yes, sir. They are the same.
And I had no problem with that. I don't think there's an easier way to do it. I think we should read them separately.
And I already, I'm sure as they saw, I've already combined 3.3, like the next instruction you're gonna see, 3.3D. I've already combined that.
And I
by putting
appreciate that, and
Robert
if there's
and
no
Larry.
objection to that, because we're not different names. So the next I have 3.3D, possession of firearm and discharge causing death.
No objection.
No objection.
Next I have lesser as to count 1, 7.7, manslaughter.
No objection.
No objection.
And next I have the same thing, but as to count 2, 7.7, manslaughter.
No objection.
No objection.
Next I have 3.3, aggravation of a felony by carrying a firearm.
No objection.
No
No objection.
objection.
Accurate.
Next I have 3.6A, insanity.
No objection.
No objection.
Next, I have 3.6F, justifiable use of deadly force, as to count 2, Miriam Deans.
No objection, and we have put in aggravated battery and aggravated assault, and I've put in the definitions of those 2.
Judge, the only thing I do want to place on the record is we are not waiving our position that based on the court's ruling as to battered child syndrome and only limiting it to Miriam, because the initial hearing, our contention was we were going to attempt to have that. I don't want to waive that objection.
Okay,
That we are formally requesting a self-defense instruction on Robert Deans, although we know the court's previous ruling from a hearing.
And
All right.
just, the only thing I would put on the record is that we, of course, have always objected to the self-defense and battered child syndrome
On
coming in.
both.
But again, based on your court's ruling, we agree that these instructions are correct, legally correct.
All right, and I just want to make note that the battered child syndrome is at the bottom
Yes.
Yes, Judge.
of that, so it is,
The defense and I kind of talked
Yes,
about that, and I think we're
that's-
okay with the way it
yes.
reads, since they're legally supposed to be read together.
Right, you have to have the self-defense.
okay.
Yes.
Next, I have 3.7, plea of not guilty, reasonable doubt.
It's
No-
standard, no
No
objection.
objection.
Next, I have 3.9, weighing the evidence,
It's,
paragraphs 1 through 8.
yeah, the ones that are in there are accurate.
Oh, and
No
Judge,
objection.
except that I need to take out the defendant testifying.
Oh, we
on the second page.
All right, yeah, just go ahead and,
I'll take that out and email just that. Is it okay if I just email that 3.9 back to both of you?
yeah.
Okay.
And could you bring in 3 copies though,
Sure,
just in
of
case?
course. Yes, sir.
Next, I have 3.9A, defendant not testifying, which should be given.
Yes.
I agree, Judge.
All right. Next, I have 3.9B, defendant's statements.
No
Yes,
objection.
no objection.
Next, I have 3.10, rules for deliberation, paragraphs 1 through 7.
No objection.
Next, I have 3.11, cautionary instruction.
Yes, no objection.
No objection.
Next, I have 3.12, verdict.
No objection, as the court can see, we put not guilty for reason of insanity or not guilty. So we
Oh,
have
let me
added
see
in-
that, yeah.
Yes, that's a little modification of
Right.
it. There's no objection, I believe, from the state.
No, we do not object. That's an accurate statement of what the verdict form is.
Right. And then I have the verdict form itself. It is 1, 2, and I will read it to the jury, 3 and 4 pages, signatures on the 4th page. You all have agreed to this verdict form?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right. Finally, I have 3.12A, single defendant, multiple counts or informations. 1 paragraph.
No objection.
Yeah, yes. No objection. Are we at 312A?
312, yeah,
Yes, no
312A.
objection.
And then finally, I have 3.13, submitting case to jury.
No objection.
No objection.
All right, well, we are good to go, and any objections
Weighing the evidence? Yeah.
about any of the other stuff from both sides are preserved, but they appear to be consistent with my rulings, and based on those rulings, the parties are in agreement as to this set of instructions. The only minor change is to take out the defendant testifying.
Yes, sir.
So we'll be ready to go at 9 a.m.
Yes, and Ms. Hersey Folgera had filed 2 motions asking for the special jury instruction on battered child, and I understand the state's position that, but based on the court's ruling, so I would assume that's granted.
Right.
I also filed an actual requested instruction with just that. The other one that she had filed, she did file a motion on the premeditation, which I understand from your ruling that
Denied.